I heard the program yesterday. I had a spray at the Turnbull Government over Health Minister Greg Hunt's obstinate attitude towards e-cigarettes, where he's refusing to relax restrictions on their use. This is despite expert, informed and conclusive evidence from a vast range of medical organisations around the world proving that e-cigarettes help people give up smoking the traditional toxic-ridden cigarettes which, let's face it, they can do irreparable harm and even kill you. But no, the Federal Health Minister continues to stick his head in the sand and refuses to even listen to those experts, instead opting for the holier-than-thou politically correct thought police that tell him what he wants to hear, and stupidly he goes with it and treats it as gospel. Who the hell these bigoted idiots are, I'm damned if I know, but for a minister who's supposed to act in the interests of the whole community, he plainly fails. He's an idiot. And where there's one politician who's taken up the fight for common sense on this issue, and that's Liberal Democrat Senator David Leyonhjelm, who says the Turnbull Government has lost all credibility with its stubborn attitude. Senator, thanks so much for your time this afternoon. Good to talk to you.
Good afternoon.
You've got this latest report compiled by a totally credible source. That's the Public Health England. What exactly does that tell us that we don't already know from other reports?
Yes, Public Health England came out probably 18 months ago, and with a report that said vaping e-cigarettes are 95% safer than smoking tobacco. And so that's sort of been the rationale for the UK and a number of other countries saying, okay, there's no good reason why we should prevent e-cigarettes from being widely available. But of course Australia has held back, and our regulators have said, oh no, we can't be too sure. Maybe it leads to other illnesses, or maybe people will take up vaping and then I'll move across to tobacco. Well, this new report by Public Health England that you referred to, it basically dismisses all of those objections, all the concerns that are being raised, all the objections are being raised by the anti-vaping people, and we seem to have a large proportion of them in Australia, are wrong. And that e-cigarettes in the UK are now contributing to at least 20,000 new people quitting in the UK each year, and possibly many, many more. There is no good argument, no reasonable argument that using e-cigarettes leads more people to taking up smoking. That's been knocked on the head. And it's basically not doing any of the things that the anti-e-cigarette people have been alleging.
Exactly. I've been following this very closely because I am a user of vape, and I have not had a cigarette for about 10 months, and I don't even have the urge to go back on a cigarette. I don't know where the hell they get their information from. I think if they got out in the real world and found out what really goes on, it might be helpful. But you've been pushing the issue on behalf of us e-cigarette users for some time, and thank you so much for doing so. But are there any other politicians from any other political colour agreeing with you? Are they coming out in support anywhere around the halls of Parliament House?
Yes, and in fairness, it sort of goes across party lines too.
Good, it might.
James Patterson, for example, in the Liberal Party, I'm pretty sure he's on the record as having supported e-cigarettes. You've got me slightly at a loss here because
but you're not just a lone voice
of them, but there are two or three that have said things, but none of them are changing. I mean, the Minister, Greg Hunt, and his department, and they're probably the real problem here more than the Minister. He's just doing what he's told by his department.
Why can't he stand up and say, hey, look, have a look at this report, have a look at that report, have a look at these other reports that go back quite some time, and come back and tell me that we're wrong? He's actually flying in the face of solid evidence and favouring the do-gooders who, no matter whatever they came up with in the reports, they'd see another side of it and would try and influence the Minister henceforth.
Yes, they do. One of my former staffers made the joke that they think these people who are opposed to it are just opposed to enjoying anything to do with your mouth. So that's why they oppose alcohol. They probably oppose oral sex too if they had the opportunity. But I see a more ideological background to this opposition. I think if e-cigarettes were being promoted by communes from Nimbin or somewhere like that, I don't think the health department would have too much problem with them. But because, amongst others, the tobacco companies are getting into this space and saying, well, if we're not going to sell cigarettes, we want to sell people replacements for cigarettes, I think that's prompting the opposition from our health department, who says anything that tobacco companies touch is toxic, and we're not going to have a bar of it. And, irrespective of whatever effects that has on the health of Australians. The other thing that they seem to be ignoring, which mystifies me, is Australia has sort of led the world in trying to reduce rates of smoking. We've got the highest tobacco taxes in the world. We were the first in the world to introduce plain packaging. And yet the rate of smoking is not declining in Australia. The latest data shows that it's static, notwithstanding what else has been done. And yet, in other countries, the rate of smoking is no higher, where they don't have plain packaging. Their taxes aren't so high, but they have e-cigarettes. And there's got to be the main difference. And one extra piece of evidence, which sort of suggests or points out how wrong the local people are, is in the countries where they have another alternative to cigarettes, which is called snus, which is powdered tobacco, which you snort. It doesn't cause, it's not as innocent as e-cigarettes, but it's less harmful, a lot less harmful for you than smoking. So a country like Sweden, for example, the rate of smoking is down to 5%, and the rate of smoking in Australia is 14%. So
the figures speak for themselves. I mean, there's all the evidence in the world, and I've studied it myself because obviously I'm at the coalface of it myself. Meanwhile, while they ignore it in our health department here, people are continuing to kill themselves on cigarettes.
Yes.
Would you go as far as to say the government could potentially have blood on its hands over this?
Yes, I do. I think that's exactly right. I think they are absolutely culpable in people continuing to die from tobacco-caused illnesses. There's undoubtedly people who continue to smoke, suffer ill effects, and sometimes they're fatal ill effects, who would have quit if e-cigarettes were available. And as you know, because you're an e-cigarette smoker, you have to go to quite a lot of trouble to obtain these things.
Whereas in England, you can just go into a street corner and corner shop and arm yourself up, and away you go.
Yes, exactly right. And so it's hard to do. It's a lot of mucking around. A lot of smokers don't do it for that reason, but they would do it if you could just go into a vaping shop, like they're on every second street corner in Italy and places like that. And they would have quit cigarettes, and the chances are they would not be ill, and in some cases they wouldn't have died.
Yeah,
I think it's a fair thing to say.
I think just finally, I think the fact that I think somebody came out and said, we don't know the long-term damage that these cigarettes could do, say in 20, 30, maybe 40 years. For God's sake, I won't be around in 20, 30, 40 years. I don't give a damn. It's probably elongating my life in the meantime.
Yeah, well, if you don't give up smoking, if you continue to smoke, you certainly won't be able to test that theory either. But, but the thing is, we do know that cigarettes are dangerous. We do know their ill effects. They have been studied for 30 or 40 years. What we know in e-cigarettes is there's only nicotine there. That's all there is.
That's relatively harmless.
So, you can't really say you're introducing a new toxin by these e-cigarettes, and therefore we have to have a long-term study on it. And in any case, I mean, we allow people to buy pharmaceuticals, medications for headaches and toothaches and all kinds of things, and they haven't had anything like 30 or 40 years of experience. So it's a ridiculous standard.
Well, more power to your elbow, David, and thanks so much for what you're doing, and continue to keep up the good fight, and anything we can ever do, from my side anyway, just let me know.
I will. Thank you very much for your support.